The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. You're giving veterans a voice today. Powered by WorkSimple, where we simplify your mission.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Lock in every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, for Tracer Rounds targeting veteran resources.
You wonder why life feels like chaos, like tracer rounds flying all around you? That's why I created the Tracer Rounds podcast. Every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I help cut through the noise and point veterans to those resources they need. Since 2023, join me.
To hear interviews with veteran artists, veteran business owners, and businesses that support veterans. Catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and MB Radio. If you miss a show, you can listen again on Wreaths Across America Radio every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to see if you are on target. MBR, giving veterans a voice.
And welcome back to the Tracer Rounds podcast. I'm Terri, your host, and with me tonight is Carolee, and she is also a podcast host on the MB Radio platform, and we've just got to start her show here, and so now we're introducing her, and I'm so excited to talk to her today. So welcome, Carolee.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm super excited.
Yes, I am too. I was on your show recently, and that was really fun to talk to you. So I can't wait to hear your conversation. So now I get to ask you the questions.
I know. And, it's interesting how the different perspectives, because I'm not a veteran, but I am a military mom. So
definitely military in this context for sure.
Yes.
So where did you grow up?
Gosh, so I was raised in Nevada.
Nevada, okay.
Yes, and I spent probably 28 years there, and I ended up getting a promotional transfer to just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and I was there for about 3 years, and then my family had moved to Montana, so after about 3 years, I ended up moving to Montana. And then from there, I met my husband, had my babies who are now all adults, and 15 years to the day, I'm back here in Tennessee. So
nice. So how would you say your upbringing was in Nevada? Were you in one of the areas that's highly traveled, I guess I would say, or was it more low key and in a smaller town, and the bright lights of Vegas and Reno didn't impact you?
Actually, so one of the adages back in the day was that Reno is so close to hell you can see sparks. I lived in Sparks. So they were neighboring, little cities. And back when we moved there, I think the population of Sparks was about 30,000, and now it's got to be getting close to 1 million.
Oh wow!
And yeah, now mind you, it's probably been 50 years, so a lot changes, and I just haven't been back since, I'd say probably 2016. And I would not want to live there again. But I lived in Sparks. I lived in Reno. And yeah, it was, it's a gambling town.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot for kids to do. So we would, find means to keep ourselves occupied. And we would try to stay out of trouble, or at least not get caught. So...
In some of those towns in Nevada, they have wild horses that roam the neighborhoods.
They do. Wild Mustangs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend. So have you ever seen the movie 8 Seconds?
Yes.
Okay. And Lane Frost?
Yes.
His cousin was a friend of ours.
Oh, really?
So at the end of the movie, they're showing pictures of Lane and like different pictures of Lane when he was growing up. And there's a picture of him and his cousin, and they're wearing these red boots. Well, his cousin had was a friend of mine, him and his wife. And so one of the things that he would do is he would contract with the state to help wrangle some of those Mustangs
Oh, wow.
and get them, brought in and make sure, that they were all okay and all that good stuff. So,
Well, they were saying that sometimes those Mustangs made a lot of damage in the front yards and all that. And I had seen a picture from someone that lived there, and she had shown that the horse was eating the grass in the front yard. Well, what grass there was, I guess, because um, a lot of the subdivisions don't necessarily have grass. They have more like desert type um, landscaping.
yeah, it's very alkaline in there. And a lot of places, well, and of course there's, they share water resources with several other states, and there's always a fight. But a little tip for you, a little bit of trivia, at least back in the 90s, this was the case, that 90% of the population in Nevada live on only 4% of the land.
Oh, wow.
And it's because it's so mountainous, so rocky, so, alkali, that they just can't, they don't have water in certain areas. So, it's just not conducive.
Yeah. That makes sense. I grew up in Idaho, so I've made a couple trips through Nevada, either just as a destination or just passing through.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think I played the slots once in Reno. I think
Oh,
once, but that's it because I'm not really a gambler. So I mean, like the nickel slots at the
yeah.
time, I don't even know if they still do that. But
I'm sure they probably do. They probably got rid of the penny slots, and they were, the thing about Nevada, they are in every gas station, every grocery store, everywhere you went, they had them. So,
in the airport.
yeah, absolutely. It's a big revenue for Nevada.
Well, I know we had a military conference that we usually had in different states, and Nevada recruited us to come twice there because they were hurting so much for tourism and things like that because it was at one of those times when tourism was very low in Nevada, and they were trying everything to try to get people to come that way.
Yeah, not surprising. Not surprising at all.
Right.
But yeah, I still have family that's there, but I try not to go back. It's too crowded for me.
Right. So your sons were in the military. They're not still serving, right? They both retired. Can you tell us a little bit of that, and then why kind of that leads into why you're podcasting now?
Absolutely. So our oldest, we have two Marine veterans, and our oldest initially, so when we were in Montana, he actually it was an Army National Guard member. And he ended up getting deployed twice during Operation Enduring Freedom to Afghanistan. His original MOS that he had signed up for was mechanic, but then when he goes deployed, he ended up becoming route clearance. So, and then he came back and he went to his recruiter, his Army recruiter, and he said, "Hey, I want to go full active duty." And he's like, "Great, what do you want to do?" And he says, "I want infantry." And his recruiter said, "Oh, we don't have any positions right now for infantry." And he's like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, but we've got this, 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 and this." He's like, "Look, if you don't have any, I'll go next door to the Marine Corps, and I'm sure they've got infantry positions." "Oh, you wouldn't do that." And so my son got up, walked next door, said, "Hey, you got any infantry positions?" The recruiter there said, "Absolutely." And, the rest there is history. So he signs with them. He goes to boot camp. And of course, when he was in the Army, he had a tattoo across his shoulder blades that said soldier. And now he's in the Marine Corps.
Oh no.
They are not soldiers in the Marine Corps.
Right. Yes, they're Marines.
So or a warrior or something. But oh my gosh, not only was he older than most of the recruits, he also has this, plastered on his back.
Right.
So he he came home one day for a week on leave, and his dad and him went to get tattoos. And so what do you do when you're in the military and you make a mistake on a form? You cross it out, you put a line, and you put your initials, right?
Yeah.
That's what he did with his tattoo.
Oh, no.
So it still says soldier, but there's a line through it with his initials.
Oh, no.
And so, but so he ends up, there was a woman that he had known who called him shortly after he graduated from boot camp, and just full of drama and such. So, he's a rescuer. And so needless to say, they get married, they have a kid. She's, I would say, not in her right mind, but anyway, he gets deployed a couple times to Japan, and she's home with the kid, and then she sends him a Dear John letter basically while he's deployed. And so they end up getting divorced, which, okay. And then he's seeing another woman, and he gets deployed again. And so his girlfriend at the time on his behalf would send their son or his son gifts. Well, he had to come back stateside in order to reenlist. And so they didn't have any military planes coming back. So he had to go commercial, and he had let his ex-wife know he was coming back stateside, which was not a good thing, because she ended up filing harassment and stalking charges against him. So the second he stepped off the plane in LA, he got arrested.
Oh, no.
And then he got extradited to Montana. It was just horrible. The whole situation was horrible. And then the girlfriend helped bond him out, had a big fundraiser and such, and so that was a plus. The whole situation was just stupid. And then at this point, he ends up marrying her, the girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I liked her. She was funny that she wasn't much younger than me, which was kind of funny, but very straight to the point. But they got married December of 2020, and then in March of 2021, they found out she had stage 4 cancer.
Oh, my goodness.
And so his unit was set to deploy again in April, but he had the opportunity to just stay home with her, of course, work on base when he needs. And so he had a second job delivering Domino's pizza because his wife isn't working. They're living with his mother-in-law, and she was kind of anyway. So, and the mother-in-law is not working, and nobody could afford me, and all that kind of stuff. So he's trying to make sure that bills are paid and the house is paid, and his wife is getting the care that she needs, and so on and so forth. And then his unit deploys in April, and then in August of 2021, his unit ends up getting detoured to Kabul, Afghanistan. His unit was the 2-1 unit. Those 13 servicemen and women, the majority was from his unit. And so as a mom, I'm thankful, but I am heartbroken because I know what he's going through, the survivor's guilt. Yeah. And he just, it really broke him, I think. And then he ended up with a new PDS in Virginia. And so his wife opted to stay with her mom there in California, where all her doctors were. So he went on to Virginia, and it was within, 3 months or so she passed. Oh, and then so then my middle son, he originally had wanted to become a Navy. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And of course, that's the whole Chris Kyle thing.
Right.
And he'd wanted to do that since he was like 12. So we're at a school football game, and the Marine Corps is there recruiting. And so he goes and talks to him, and he's trying, they brought the pull-up bar, and he can't even do a single pull-up, right? And so they're trying to talk him into signing up. And he says, no, I want to go Navy. And he says, well, come on down. We'll set an appointment, come down, and I'll get the Navy on the phone for you. And, or have him come over and you can just talk with them. And he's like, okay. So he goes down there, and true to his word, the recruiter calls next door and says, hey, I've got somebody here who wants to sign up with the Navy. And the recruiter for the Navy says, I don't have time to talk to him. So my son says, where do I sign with the Marine Corps?
Right.
And part of it was, so he's super, super smart. They gave him the, what's the equivalent to the ASVAB, the military one. Anyway, the test. I can't remember the name of that. And they told him, this is just a practice. You have all day to do it. Right. Here's some paper. And my son went through, he was done in like 20 minutes and didn't even put anything to paper. And he scored like an 82. And so they're like, oh, this is great. And he's like, oh, I can do better. You said this was just a practice. No, this is great. You don't need to worry about it. We'll just take this. And he's like, no, I can do better. And they're like, don't worry about it. So then they said, okay, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to go infantry because of my brother and his unit. And they looked at him and they called him a lot of bad words because here he is, super smart. And unfortunately, they were hoping he would go into something else, such as, hey, Joel, such as, I don't know, officer or something. But no, he really wanted to do the infantry. So he goes through boot camp. He comes home for his 10 days RA leave. He goes back. He's in holding, waiting to get picked up for ITB. And then all of a sudden, he posts something on Snapchat, and I open it up, and it says, I can't feel the right side of my face. Ha, ha, ha. And he's got a picture, and his face is starting to droop. And I'm like, call your mom. And it's over a 96, right? So he's like, well, they don't think I'm having a stroke. The instructors don't think I'm having a stroke. So, and I don't want to know what it is. I'm scared to know what it is. I don't want to get kicked out, and I was like, you've got Bell's palsy. And he's like, I don't know what it is. And there's no place is open, and I was like, you need to go in, you need to get some antivirals. So anyway, he ends up waiting until things are back open because it was like a holiday weekend. In fact, it was over Thanksgiving is what it was. So when it happened, so he thought everything was closed. Well, come to find out, there was another place, another clinic, but on the other side of the base, which he was not aware of. They didn't tell him it was there. So it morphed. So it ended up morphing into neuropathy, basically from his ear all the way down his jaw. And then once the palsy went away, and he still had really severe pain. He was sitting in medical. He had a lot of issues there because the palsy was gone. Physically, they can't see anything. They had him on the max dosage of gabapentin, 3,600 milligrams a day.
Wow.
And he had adverse reactions to that, which was that it made him so dizzy he couldn't walk without help. So he pretty much atrophied. He went in at maybe 150 pounds. And when he got out, he was almost at 120. I mean, because he couldn't walk, he couldn't, on his own, but the staff sergeant, the gunny, the first sergeant, they're harassing him, telling him he's a liar, he's a faker, there's nothing wrong with him. The buddies that would help walk him, to wherever he needed to go. We're told they can't help him. They tried to write him up for meandering. Well, it turns out he had an adverse reaction to the COVID shot is what had happened.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the gabapentin made it even worse. And then the stress of it all, it turns out he had what's called trigeminal neuralgia. And in the 1800s, they called that suicide disease because they said that the pain was worse than childbirth and amputation. And because, of course, the medicine, the pain meds back then were nothing compared to what we have today. So people were killing themselves.
Oh my gosh.
But we didn't know. I mean, he had so many issues. He was being harassed every day, asked 20, 30 times a day just for his light duty chit. And even though the Marine Corps had already told everybody, there was a memorandum that had gone out like a year and a half prior that they were no longer allowed to ask for the chits. They instead had to go to the corpsmen and ask the corpsmen, what are the limitations for so-and-so?
Right.
And I mean, there are videos that are out there of my son being harassed like he was back in boot camp. In his face, screaming at him, telling him he's a loser, telling him and here he is, he's already graduated boot camp. He didn't ask for any of this to happen.
Right.
And he, that was the last thing he wanted. He so wanted to be in the fight. He wanted to be with everybody else. And he didn't get that opportunity. And in fact, it got so bad, the harassment, that he was so upset. I remember talking to him. He was so upset. He was crying. He just couldn't deal with things anymore in the way that he was being treated. And he said, I got to go. I've got to go do this something. I don't know if it's formation or something, but and so I was like, well, call me back when you get back to your rack. And he's like, okay. Well, I didn't hear from him. And so I'm freaking out and I don't hear from him for several days.
Oh, wow.
And come to find out, he was to the point he was ready to take all of his medication at one time. He'd had enough. And so he actually took himself to the mental ward there. And because he was like, this is not good. Nobody was able to heal in those medical bays. They can't heal. They're constantly being harassed by leadership, constantly.
Yeah.
To the point that my son and I both filed an IG complaint. The gunny got demoted well below sergeant.
Oh, wow.
They completely removed the other two out of there. They brought in a whole new set of leadership and it made things better. But when he got stressed, that's the other thing with the trigeminal neuralgia. You have a 7th and 8th cranial nerve on each side. And so along the nerve, you also have a blood vessel that, goes up. And so when you get stressed, your blood pumps more, right? And so it kind of expands that vein and would hit that nerve. And so then it causes that shooting, burning, searing pain. And that was his constant. And so it was terrible what happened.
That's horrible.
They shut the power off because for medical, because they didn't want them using the Wi-Fi. They didn't want them on their charging their stuff. It was just bad. I can't even begin to tell you how bad it really truly was. And so there was that going on. And then my oldest Marine is saying, Mom, there's checks and balances and, they can't do X, Y, and Z. And, maybe he's just, exaggerating things. And come to find out, that's not the case. Not only was he not exaggerating, but they were doing things that my oldest was saying there should be checks and balances for. And that kind of really dampened my oldest's thoughts of staying in the Marine Corps as well. And so, we got through all of that, and they actually both ended up. So, my oldest combined had roughly 16 years of military service. And then my youngest, of course, he was almost right at 2 years that he sat there after, between his, boot camp and the time that he got medically separated.
Wow.
And he got medically separated initially with 70%. And then he got his first check, and it was more than what they said it was going to be. And I was like, you put that away. Don't touch it, because they're going to want it back. And then the following week, he gets a letter saying that they re-rated him at 80%.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, oh my gosh. So somebody actually really looked at it, which was good.
Yeah.
But between the two, they got out within a month of each other, the same year, just about 2 years ago. And my oldest, he at this time now he's on his third wife, and they have a baby on the way, and he'd been out for a month, and then things started spiraling for him. And he ended up coming all the way home from Georgia. And then, I was like, look, I had this channel already, because now it's like, I need to figure out how to find resources for my kids. They're gonna need resources. And that's the kind of mom I am. I'm going to find every tool I can. Whether they use it or not is up to them. But I'm going to try and give them every opportunity to succeed, be it, how to become independent, how to do things on your own, and think for yourself, what have you. So that was the start of Conversations with a Vet. Was just before they got out. I wanted to figure out how to find resources. I didn't know anything about the resources and even how to go about finding them outside of the VA. So I thought, what better way to find these resources than from veterans themselves? And you know what? I could help veterans too by having them come on and tell their stories. So if they come on and tell their story, it's going to help other veterans who may be listening, because not only are they going to tell their story and those veterans that are listening can relate, they're also going to come up and they're going to talk about the resources that they found that worked for them. And that's also going to help any veteran who might be listening, who might not have tried that particular resource. So that morphed. And then my oldest son, as I said, he spiraled, came home, and I took him to the VA, which was like 5 minutes away from my house. And it was, they're like, look, we need to keep you for 3 or 4 days. And he freaked out. And to his credit, he never got out of his chair, and he never threatened anybody. But he called him everything else, that he could think of. And he was home the next morning, because they checked out the channel. They saw all the resources. They knew that, I could have a handful of Marines from different states at my door in a moment's notice to help. And so they let him go the next morning. And here he is now. He's got, of course, 3 stepdaughters, but they have a brand new baby. Well, he's not a baby anymore. He's a toddler. And, he actually just had put together with, through the Legion, the American Legion, he put together a first annual 10K march over Memorial Day. And and that was his way of honoring his unit. And, for the first go, had like 26 people that came and walked, and so super proud of him. He's come a long way, and he just sounds so much better. And then my youngest, Marine, he, I found through my realtor strange enough, it's a chiropractor. But the chiropractor became a chiropractor because his mother had trigeminal neuralgia, and the only help she found was from a chiropractor, which was what made him become a chiropractor to help others. And turns out, so he referred us, because we weren't close enough, but he found somebody. He took the time. He looked to see what they believed in. Would they mesh well with us as a family? So, and he went in and they did this needling. So basically, you think of like a corkscrew on the end of a needle, basically, right? And they go in the back of the neck, and and I guess from what my son said, he completely passed out. But
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and but he said he went from a pain of like an 8, 9 down to a 4.
Oh wow.
And so that's huge. Now he'll need to go back every so many months or whatnot, but that's huge. And I wouldn't have found that if it hadn't been about talking about my children, and specifically what was going on with my youngest Marine, because and I'm so thankful that I was able to find those resources. And then talking to other veterans like yourself, and asking about those resources is just the least I can do to give back.
So how is it being mom and having Marines and just navigating those systems? I mean, you have to be pretty tenacious to go against someone like a gunny and really, put yourself out there and stand up for your kids, because like you say, when you're sick or hurt on duty, you used to be, I don't know if it's still the same, but used to be, you were like, sure, you're not really hurt. You're just faking it. You get up and do your job. You're just trying to get out of something.
Yeah. And that's the same. It's still the same. And I am one of those. I've always been one of those. You grow up in certain circumstances and you try and change how you raise your kids. Right. And you always wonder if you're doing them a disservice or not in how you raise them, because you don't know how they're going to be once they become an adult.
Right.
But I mean, I will fight tooth and nail. I will fight to the death if that's what has to happen to make sure that my kids, at least one, know that I love them dearly, and I will do everything in my power to figure out how to help them. Not to say I'm doing it for them, right? I will find them the tools, but they've got to be the ones to actually pick them up and use them.
Right.
But in this particular instance, I mean, the other side effect to the gabapentin was that he ended up with severe light sensitivity in one ear, hearing, or one eye, hearing loss in the same ear on that side.
Wow.
The gabapentin he was having issues putting proper sentences together. So there was a lot of things going on. Memory loss also. So every time he would call, I would have a spiral notebook, and I would write down the time that he called. And then he would tell me about what was going on, what happened that day, and so, who was getting harassed, who was getting, which mainly it was just him. Yeah. But, and then he would say, so-and-so videoed it. And so I'd say, who was that again? And I'd write down the name of who had that video. And, and I just kept track. And our oldest had said, hey, Mom, there's going to come a point you're going to need to file an IG complaint. And I was like, I have no idea even how to do that. And is it something that as a parent I can even do? So he's like, oh yeah, you can. And so I told my youngest, or Marine, and I said, hey, your brother said, this about this. And he goes, well, I don't know, because now today things are better, but then the next day it's crap. So then he's calling and he's crying and he's upset, and, and he's so stressed. And
yeah.
And so then it just, like I said, it got to that point with the medication, that's when he realized, no, something needs to change. And it was like, okay. I mean, I'd already called JAG at Camp Lejeune, and I said, look, this is what's going on. What recourse as a parent, as a Marine, do we have?
Yeah.
Because this is what's happening. This is what's being said. This is what they're doing. And that's how I found out that they had already like a year, at least year and a half before, had put out a memorandum about even being able to ask for those light duty chits. But they purposely harassed him. They called him into their office, into the first sergeant's office. The staff sergeant and the gunny were there as well. They told him when he came that he needed to bring his medications. And so he goes in there. He's got his medication. They say they want to see his medication. Why is he taking so much? Who is his doctor? Who prescribed it? Where are they located? Which was a civilian neurologist at that point, right? And so he had a follow-up and with the civilian neurologist, and he gets there, and this was like a week after all of that had happened, after they got all of the information. A week later, he gets there, and the civilian neurologist looks at him and says, no, I don't really think there's anything wrong with you.
What?
I am not kidding you. I am not kidding you. I have all of that documented. And that was, I was like, this is insane. And then like, I don't know, it was like a month later, I think she closed her doors. And it was,
they harassed her too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
My goodness.
I'm sure that they got a hold of her and said, he just wants out, which wasn't the case. He really didn't. But by that time he actually did, because he'd had enough of their stuff. But but it was like 6 to 8 months before he finally even saw the Navy neurologist. But I had talked to my doctor who had a friend who was a neurologist, and so she gave me her contact number and talked to her and told her kind of the symptoms. And she goes, oh, that sounds like trigeminal neuralgia. So then I'm researching this and I'm telling him, hey, when you go in, you need to tell him about this trigeminal neuralgia, see if that would be what this might be. And because he hadn't even had, that first MRI wasn't I would think a year and a half in before they even did an MRI.
Oh my goodness.
And so, I mean, the whole thing was it was such a cluster. And as a mom, this is not right. I'm going to stand up, not just for my kids, but every other person that's been sitting there in medical, like the one that was his rack mate who'd been there for 3 years with a TBI.
3 years?
And yes. And still expected to go out to formation every single day. And you know how many formations they had for medical in a day? 6.
6. Wow.
6.
I expected 3, but I didn't. 6 is really over the top.
For medical. These people aren't getting any rest. They're not getting better because they're so stressed, and it was terrible. And I just, I hit my breaking point. And I muddled through it. My son says, I'm ready to do it. And I said, okay. He goes, but I don't remember any specifics. I said, that's all right. I got you. And I gave him the dates, the times, everything he said, and he was able to put it all together. And then I wrote mine up, and we got them submitted. And it took at least 2 to 3 months before anything was heard. Yeah.
Well, I applaud you for your efforts there, because some people would have just given up and just say, put me out or whatever. I mean, they would have just let it go and not done anything about it. But I'm really glad that you did, because really, they needed to hear what was going on and know, because I've heard of others in the Army about being on medical hold and how challenging it can be to be on medical hold. Not everyone has that experience, but there are definitely those experiences out there where they're just being tested, and you're just really faking it. You can do whatever. You're perfectly fine. You're capable. You can't tell that by looking at somebody whether they're capable of something or not. You really can't.
I told my son, they are not doctors. You do not need to give them any information about it. Your chit says you cannot do X, Y, and Z, period.
Right.
And that's it. You do not, and that pissed them off. Sorry, that made them angry.
Right.
That they didn't know, and he wouldn't tell them. But there were times he was like, I'm just going to tell him. And I said, don't do it. Right. I said, because it's none of their business. They don't have the right to know what the doctors are saying is wrong with you. That is a HIPAA violation to the nth degree.
It is, yes.
And I said, but he'd get to the point and he's like, Mom, I just want out. I'm done. I can't deal with them anymore. I can't sleep. I wake up. I'm afraid they're tossing my stuff again. And, it was just so bad. And I was like, you need to hang in there. You need to hang in there. Do not just up and say, I want out. You've got to go through that med board process. You have to. You're going to get home. If you haven't gone through this med board process, you're not going to have anything available to you at the end of it. And you're not going to be able to work, which means you're not going to be able to have money, which means you're not going to be able to afford to be going to doctors and paying for all of the stuff that you're going to need potentially.
Yeah.
So, it was a lot of those conversations, a lot of really heartbreaking on my end, to hear him the way he was. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear though things are turning around for both of them, that this is, this chapter is that book is sort of closed. It's not completely closed because you're still dealing with the aftermath, but closed in the sense that he doesn't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
The harassment. So I was curious to talk about your family history in the military, because you have some storied history with your family members. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of your, I guess, great relatives and how they are tied to Fort Ord and tied to other important events?
I would love to.
Awesome.
So my great grandfather, Brigadier General Torney.
Oh, wow.
He and Walter Reed. I was trying to remember the name, and for some reason, a whole other name popped up because I was having this conversation earlier today. But he and Walter Reed were friends and neighbors back in the day, and they together came up with the vaccine for. I want to think that it was yellow fever. And then General Torney also was the one who came up with, for the Army, field medicine. And then he also, under two separate presidents, was the one that he had been appointed the United States Surgeon General.
Oh, wow.
Under two different presidents. And so those appointments, my family still has literally the original signatures by the presidents. They're framed. It's got the original seal, the whole 9 yards.
Awesome.
I know, it's incredible. And then my great grandfather would be Brigadier General Ord, as in Fort Ord. And so he and his wife were friends with the Lincolns, as in President Lincoln.
Wow.
And, well, at least President Lincoln, not Mrs. Lincoln. And so they had been invited to go to be a guest with the Lincolns at the theater. But Mrs. Lincoln didn't like Mrs. Ord because she believed that President Lincoln was in love with Mrs. Ord, which he was. But so to avoid any conflict, the Ords stayed home. And that was the night that President Lincoln got shot.
Oh, my goodness.
And then it's quite a bit of history in that regard. There is also, and so there was a small little diary from General Ord as well. Oh, the other thing with that, interestingly, the history books always say that General Lee had surrendered to General Grant. But initially, he surrendered to General Ord. So again, Ord and Lincoln were friends. And even though General Grant, he was already overseeing the war. And so, but President Lincoln asked his friend, Brigadier General Ord, to go help. And so he was not considered the commanding officer at that time. He was just helping General Grant. And so when Lee surrendered, he actually surrendered first to General Ord. And then General Ord took him to General Grant. And then at the, what is it, Appomattox? I can never say that, where they did the signing of everything at the surrender. I always have a hard time with that word, and I can't remember where it is at. But the table that they signed everything on, my mom had for years.
Oh, wow.
Where they signed the treaty and everything between the North and the South. And yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of history.
It is a heck of a lot of history. When my husband and I got married, we had General Torney's dress saber we used to cut the cake.
Oh my goodness.
That's kind of the tradition. And we've got the spurs, his spurs. Actually, we have both of their spurs, I believe. Their sabers, there's different appointments. And then would be on my mom's other side would be Ryan. And I can't think, John Ryan, I believe. And we have his appointment by a president. And I can't remember what his is, but it's signed by a president as well for where he had gotten promoted over the Army. I can't remember exactly what it was, but
oh wow.
Yeah, lots of interesting little tidbits. And I just can't remember. One of them invented the stint. And I can't remember which family member it was, but yeah.
So was General Torney, was he a doctor?
Yeah, well, yeah, I would guess he was. There's not a lot of information on the internet, right? So
yeah.
Going back and trying to find it. But when I have some stuff. I've taken some pictures. Mom has sent me little snippets and stuff on that. But yeah, I would think that he would be of some sort. But I do know Walter Reed and he were good friends. They are the ones who, they came up with that vaccine. He came up with what would be now known as field medicine, for the injured soldiers and such. So I would think maybe just had a lot of common sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if he was friends with Walter Reed too, I mean, you would think that they're like-minded and maybe
Right.
traveled in the same circles with same profession. So that would make sense. But yeah, I didn't know that. That's really neat. But that whole Lincoln story, that's amazing. That, I mean, like they literally dodged a bullet by not going to
Yes.
the theater that night.
Yeah, and strictly because Mrs. Lincoln did not like Mrs. Ord at all. But she was very jealous anyway. But yeah, she'd always been very jealous individual, especially after her son passed away. So she just kind of got really into her own head. There was a movie about it, or maybe it was a book. Maybe there's both. I can't remember. I do remember reading a book, but I think I saw some kind of a movie or a documentary or something too. And she just seemed to be really jealous of other women and stuff. So
that's interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up.
I know.
Just see some of the history that I obviously we all pretty much understand what happened to president, but the whole dynamic around it, we probably don't understand as much as there is to know about it.
Right. And it's pretty limited on what else, that we know as a family.
Yeah.
We only know what was kind of written in there. And I don't even remember. I don't think I didn't go through it, but Mom handed it to me, and I just kind of flipped through the pages and then handed it back, because my job was to basically take inventory, so that when, heaven forbid, there'll come a time where we all pass, but
Right.
when their time comes, she just wanted to make sure that we had a list of what was history, what was family heirlooms, and antiques and things of that nature. Because not only that, I can't remember, I want to think it was probably Torney, that he had been over, I don't know if it was in the Philippines or where, somewhere there was a king and queen. It wasn't England. And he had helped them with something. And they had given him to give to his wife, like the queen had, or whoever she was, like a shawl and some other odd and end stuff. And
Wow.
to this day, my mom still had it. So, it's incredible, the things that they had accumulated over the years of, gifts that had been given to them, that had just passed down. So, yeah.
That's
But
awesome.
a lot of it ended up going to museums all over. One of them was during, I believe it was General Ord's tenure. When he was there, and I think had been in Pennsylvania, and the flag that had flown, the American flag, had been shot all to heck and tore up, and my mom had that flag.
Oh,
And so she recently, when I say recently, within the last few years, returned it back to Pennsylvania, because it's their history. And so she has, she got a big thank you. There was a big thing that they had, done. So she's got all of that documentation written, signed by all the senators and stuff up there. And yeah.
you need to write a book. That needs to be, all that history needs to be, and how you put all the different pieces together, because you hear, like you said, you hear certain things and you think history went one way, but
Right.
then you hear the other side of that story. And so people really would be interested to hear, and it'd be nice, thing to keep for your family to know where they're, where there was military service in their, early
Yeah.
beginnings of the family,
Yeah,
obviously.
absolutely. I think it's amazing. And, a little kind of another interesting little tidbit. So my mom, she actually is related to the Queen of England,
Oh my goodness.
or was before she passed. But
Yeah.
she is from, and she's got all the documentation going all the way back. Apparently, there was this prince who was in line to become king, but he had been bequeathed to this princess, but he had this affair with like a handmaiden or something. And she got pregnant, and then the royals found out about her and shipped her to America. And that's where my mom comes from, and
Oh,
is the
wow.
lineage there. And it's so funny because she looked, and still kind of does look, like Queen Elizabeth. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
it's
my
amazing.
goodness.
And my
That
son
is.
said that he went and he looked, and he said he found her name, um, like on page 7 in really fine print, as to ascend to the throne. But like, so I was like, I told her, I said, when Queen Elizabeth died, I said, do you want me to send, a condolence, on your behalf? Maybe
Right?
you should introduce yourself. And she's like, they probably don't care. So
Oh, wow. That's cool. So what's next for your, podcast? So you're on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern?
yes.
And so are you looking for guests? Do you have, some guests lined up coming up? What can you
Uh,
share about your show?
so I'm always looking for guests, and you know, it doesn't matter where you're at. If you were a veteran, I'd love to have you on the channel and have a conversation. I've got a guest I actually just booked, so fingers crossed. He's actually part of a nonprofit out of Montana called Montana Warriors on the Water.
Oh, wow.
And so they take veterans out fishing. And, they bring everything they need to fish and kind of get their minds off and let them talk and have, story time, whatever. And, just something, it's all paid for. It's all taken care of. There's nothing, no cost to them, to the veteran. And so I've got him coming on. I actually was setting that up just before the show today with you.
Nice.
And so I'm super excited about that. And then there's several others I've got to make some calls on. So yeah. And if anybody is listening and they're interested to come on and have a conversation, you can contact me at conversationswithavet@gmail.com or conversationswithavet@mbradio.us.
Awesome. So who is your favorite guest so far to have on the program?
There's so many. Obviously the ones that you don't expect to hear the stories. There's funny. I can't really narrow down one favorite one as far as a guest.
Mhm.
Favorite story, I can do that. His name is Gary Burney.
Mhm.
And he was in the military, and then when he got out, he became a uniformed Secret Service agent.
Oh, wow.
And he was basically in charge of the West Wing. And he was standing guard in front of the West Wing. And here comes this young lady, and she's got this newspaper, and she says, "I'm here to see the president. I've got his paper." And he says, "He's already got that paper," and turned it away. And that was the start of the suspicion of Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton. And he
no.
was actually the whistleblower.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So his whole story, all of that is on the channel as well. Gary Burney, Byrne. Great guest. But it's one of those, yeah, that one kind of got me a little shadow banned. So, not even kidding you. So yeah, you got to be careful with, what you put out there nowadays. So,
Right.
but yeah, it was the funniest thing because it was like, we're going along having a conversation about his time in the military and what he's doing. And, and then all of a sudden he starts talking about, this young lady. And then, pretty soon after he turns the lady away because, he knows the president already had that newspaper. Then like 5 minutes later, the phone rings at the desk that is only the president calls that for the Secret Service agent. So he picks it up and he said it was the president saying, "Hey, I'm supposed to have an intern bring me some papers. If you could just let her in, please." So, but I've had amazing guests all the way around.
Yeah.
And so I'm very thankful for each and every guest. And when opportunities arise, I try and have them come back and see where they're at today versus where they, were the last time we talked. I've got to be close to 200 interviews.
Wow. Good for you. That's
Potentially.
awesome. Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, just super excited to do it and to help where I can. As a mom, this is all I know how to do to help. So,
well, definitely you're doing a good service for a lot of us, a lot of veterans. For one, getting the stories out there. For two, finding resources, connecting people with different resources that they didn't know were out there. I had a conversation with a former VSO, which a veteran service officer, who said, most VAs don't even show you all the services they offer. They're behind the desk in a catalog or some kind of literature brochure, and they don't share it unless you ask for it. So there are a lot of resources within the VA we don't know about. And then outside the VA, like you said, there's plenty of other agencies or organizations that want to
Yeah.
help, that really offer some benefit to military members. So I applaud what you do, and I thank you for what you do. And I'm glad that you were able to help your sons in their struggles, with the different things that were going on in their service careers. So all this has played a part in getting you to where you are today. So I appreciate. I know the struggle wasn't what you wanted, but I know that it really has shaped who you are and what you're doing right now. So
Thank you.
for that, it's definitely grateful for you to be able to be on this side of it.
Thank you. I'm loving it, and I love our veterans and everything that all of you have done to help not just the country, my kids, and everybody else. The role models that you all are to those who want to join. So, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, this is Tracer Around signing off. Thank you, Carolee.
Thank you.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. You're giving veterans a voice today. Powered by WorkSimple, where we simplify your mission.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Welcome, Quack.
Program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
The web at mbradio.us.